Kenya responded. We talk about lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. But when you read about what other countries have done, we actually haven't had the lockdowns. We have had restrictions, but people have managed to work within those restrictions. We've had guidelines, and people have observed that guidelines. Thankfully, as Dr. Ambacho says, by observing the guidelines, you're not as sick anymore, but you're productive. And I think that for me is, answering that question, is that we have really taken this opportunity. The second thing we've used this opportunity is to rebuild back our confidence in our own industries. We've been talking Buy Kenya, Build Kenya, but we haven't taken all the necessary steps to actually do that. Thank you, Jane, for the committee for buying from Kenya. We have gazetted a list of products that can be procured from within by government. And therefore, it is the challenge to Kenyan industrialists to ensure that this faith is not misplaced. There are many people who import medical goods. They showed up, they went to the press and said, these things are not, they don't meet standards. But the doctors themselves will tell you that the locally produced PPEs, they feel more confident in them. So we need to start believing in ourselves and rising up to this challenge, and we can confirm we can live with restrictions, but we can still be productive within them and discover new ways of working. You can have a meeting without drinking tea, but you'll still have the meeting from wherever you are. So we can be very creative.
Okay, there are some people who say, or some experts, economic experts, who say that Kenya has relied more on import distribution and less on export production. Would you say that these are some of the lessons we are taking going forward, that Kenya does actually have the potential? It's just that it's taken us a crisis like the COVID pandemic for us to realize this potential that lies within the country.
No, I think to correct you, Kenya, I think the policy of import substitution died a long time ago. I think we recognized that we needed to have an open economy. So the question is, we've actually been building up on our exports, and that's been part and parcel. And the reason we have trade agreements and all these reach outs is to expand our exports. But there are critical commodities that we hadn't developed the capacity to do. And I think the whole world, it's not just us who've woken up. The disruption of global supply chains has made people realize that you need to have some critical supplies when you need them, and therefore you need some critical capacity for it. And that's what we will continue to do. But we are only about 50 million people. We cannot just produce for ourselves. So we must have the capacity to produce for the rest of the world. And as we now work on implementing our export strategy, it's critical to look at the goods that other parts of the world import from others and confirm if we have the capacity to produce. And my confirmation and the confirmation we've had for ourselves in these last 6 months is that we have that capacity, and we need to merge the energy of the private sector and the policies of government so that we can produce better.
Okay. Governor Anyang' Nyong'o, I would like to pose this question to you from the county's perspective. What have the counties been doing to support local economies? Because at the start of the pandemic and when the directives came into place, there was cessation of movement, and by so, most of the businesses that operate inter-county were affected. How have you been able to stimulate local economies at the county level and at the same time, still boost growth amid a pandemic?
Thank you very much. I think that's a very, very appropriate question. Counties have not only been stimulating local industries, manufacturers during the pandemic, but even before. We have been investing in labor-intensive programs in the counties. I'll give you an example, such as in Kisumu, we have what we call Kisumu County Roads Maintenance Teams, which we use to maintain roads and build access roads very much in the way that the Public Works Department did in Kenya some time ago. And we buy machinery from the local market, simple and complicated machinery, from wheelbarrows, slashes, tractors, so that these young people trained at the KICC Roads College, can get employment, but also contribute to the building of the local economy. If you take the county of Busia, for example, in a program that is supported by one of the donors, Busia County has been able to establish a cage fishing enterprise in which there is partnership between the local young people, the women, business communities, and capital from diaspora. The government of Busia has come up with a very good formula whereby one person does not own more than 10 cages, however much capital you have, and the young people who are working in these fish cages can not only get employment, but some money is also saved so that make sure that their families can send the kids to school. I think it's an example worth following in the other enterprises, in other counties. And I'm quite sure that when we're going to be launching our economic recovery strategy for the county, we shall have time for sharing lessons, see how counties can still go ahead and stimulate domestic industrialization while also creating employment for our people. Second thing is to build institutions that can be able to stimulate local entrepreneurship. Again, I'll use my county, in Kisumu County, for example. We're just finishing the building of a business innovation and incubation center, where we hope that, again, young entrepreneurs can get the opportunity, when other overheads are paid for by the county government, develop their entrepreneurship. And finally, let me say the following. As Betty has pointed out, I personally think, and this is my view as a scholar as well as a policymaker, that the policy of import substitution, industrialization, was thrown through the window prematurely, mainly because of the pressure from the Washington consensus. And I don't think that given the kind of things that we need in the domestic economy, let me give you an example, sufurias.
Yeah.
How many people use sufurias in Kenya? Millions. We need to import sufuria from anywhere. We can make our own sufurias and use them. And from making sufurias, we can learn to make other things. And therefore, import substitution, industrialization, COVID time, was proved to have been given up prematurely. Governor Kuti just gave you examples of the sanitizers and the sweets and so on. Many more examples can be given. So I really think that even in counties, we have seen and we have learned that in many ways we need to produce certain things locally, especially when there's a shutdown and the airlines are not coming, buses are not coming, then you must be self-reliant on certain things.
Right.
Finally, in the area of agriculture, Madam, I think the smallholder production, the smallholder family, is still the heartbeat of this nation. During the pandemic, we learned that without food, you can't go anywhere. Our smallholder producers, so-called farmers in the rural areas, depend too much on the market for things they can produce at home. When I was growing up, for example, the only thing we bought in the market were three things: Ibritis, sabunis, and salt. All the other food was available in my mother's compound. Beyond the kitchen was a little garden where all the vegetables were available.
Right.
In the courtyard was the cattle shed, where the cattle produced milk and we could use it for both ghee and milk. Next door were the chicken, producing eggs and themselves for eating. So we find that within the household economy, there's a lot of self-sufficiency. We must learn in the post-COVID situation, in counties in particular, support this household economy by providing seeds, by teaching the farmers how to use their soil scientifically, because certain seeds cannot grow in certain soils, In other words, we should reintroduce what I call extension service. Apparently has been relaxed. This really is the nerve center of stimulating the household economy. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Governor. Archbishop Anthony, I would like to come to you as well to pose this question to you. Archbishop Muheria, who is the chairperson, Interfaith Council on COVID-19. Some people last went to church, literally, when the directives were announced. And they've had to find other means to, seek spiritual nourishment. And this includes Zoom prayers, and also, going online to figure out how exactly, and just praying in their homes. But what would you make out of it? Because for now, it's been several months later. Do you think the congregation, the populations, are still close to God or to the spiritual higher power?
Thank you very much. First, let me thank the invitation to be on this panel, because I seem to be the only one who doesn't have $1 written on me or a Kenya shilling. But fundamentally, on behalf of all religious leaders and the religious faith community, because it's a recognition of the power of hope, because the faith communities are actually in the business of hope, and the power of hope in transformation, the power of hope driving through crisis, the power of hope to actually turn minds and even bring about all that what my colleagues on the panel have been presenting. This, at the beginning, was not so obvious. We perhaps focused very much on the health, protection, and other areas which are more directly medical or just economical. And we perhaps forgot that most intimate and perhaps more compelling part of the person, that is the spiritual and the psyche. And this is where perhaps the closing of the places of worship to public brought a big shake-up for an average Kenyan, because that is where you find solace, that is where you find hope, that is where you even find yourself, because this thing that comes upon you totally disorients you. And at the beginning, I think we missed it a little bit, but very soon, and as was directed with the formation of the Interfaith Council by His Excellency the President, and that has walked and steered the people towards a different kind of worship. It is a connectedness that bridges the social distance, that bridges the physical distance, and bridges the spiritual distance. And that has come through technology. Of course, most of us didn't know Zoom before COVID, and we discovered it. And from having a congregation of 300, you end up having a congregation of 3,000. From reaching out maybe before to only 100 hearts, you suddenly find yourself reaching out to the whole world. And this, I think, is a fantastic achievement, because that will not end now. It is about finding out how we can scale up this kind of connectedness. At the same time, I think that people have been a little more attentive, because the vulnerability of the human person has been exposed. Irrespective of your level of social status, irrespective of your financial status, and even technological advancement, we find ourselves all at equal ground when COVID came in. And so suddenly we find it is not enough to have an insurance of health or insurance of wealth. And suddenly God comes into the center of all this. And since our nation is very God-fearing and God-loving, I think this is also a wake-up call that all that we are doing in development must have God very much in the center. And that's why we thank even the religious leaders who have played a tremendous role in complementing government efforts, in reaching out to compliance, reaching out to follow up the guidelines we've received, and even to give hope. And I think if there is anything that COVID has been very strong on any sector, it is to awaken the power of hope. And that power of hope comes from a deep-seated faith.
Right.
So to answer the question you asked, yes, people are still perhaps at home, the elderly especially, but their faith, I think, is undented. They have discovered new ways. The ways of the radio for the upcountry and rural community, the ways of the TV for those who've got that access. But I also think even the ways of family worship and being together before God and feeling a new calling to play a very important point and role of solidarity in our nation. So yes, it has been a lesson, but I think it's a lesson that has made us grow and has made us even more godly, I believe.
Are we going to see more Zoom prayers and less people going to places of worship?
No, I think we'll see more people going to places of worship and more people participating in Zoom forms of worship. It will be not now going back. I do believe we're going to go forward. Right. In our going to all the counties with the Interfaith Council, which has done great, I think that is what we've received, an overwhelming response that people are hungry to be connected, but at the same time recognizing that times are changing. And we are learning. Many religious leaders who didn't have any IT exposure suddenly have become IT experts with their iPads, with their Zoom cameras. And I think that is now a new space of reaching the God's care to the people. And beyond just the fact of religion, I think it is a point of hope, challenge, and that God cares for us, but we must now do more, even moved by the fact that God has protected us.
Great. I would now like to come to Jaswinder Bedi, who is the proprietor for Bedi Investments. Before the pandemic, you were not manufacturing masks or PPEs, and then came the pandemic and you had to reinvent, and now you are churning out possibly the highest number of PPEs in the country today. What informed this, and what lessons, what business lessons have you drawn out of this pandemic period?
Thank you very much. I think I must thank His Excellency, the President. He called me early March, I still remember, and those words still come back to me repeatedly. And he said to me, Bedi, we need an in-country local solution. We don't have enough PPEs in Kenya. And I said, Your Excellency, we don't make PPEs, but let me think about it and let me see what I can do. And within no time, in 10 days, literally, I had a prototype ready. I went to the Minister's office, Minister Betty was sitting here with me, and I said, Minister, I have developed this prototype PPE, and I would like us to take it forward. In less than 2 minutes, she called Minister Kagwe, and she arranged my meeting in literally 2 hours. I was in the Ministry of Health, and Minister Kagwe called his entire team, all the doctors, everybody you could think of into a meeting, and said, guys, we have a local solution. And of course, from there on, the testing went on and things went on. And it was, for me, a learning experience that had it not been the challenge that Your Excellency you gave me personally, this wouldn't have happened. It actually encouraged many other factories, not only my own company. It encouraged more than 100 factories today who are doing this. And yes, we had to reform ourselves. It was a question of repurposing. It was a question of retooling, reinventing, re-engineering, refocus. So my biggest buzzword today is re. What else can we redo? I mean, what should we reinvent, or how can we be resilient, and the recovery, the redesign, the reimagine. So that's what this has taught Kenyans. And you know what? I was reading something the other day from Dr. Zeus, and he said when bad things happen, you have 3 choices. 1, you can either let it define you. 2, you can let it destroy you. 3, you can let it strengthen you. One thing I can say with any fear or contradiction is, as Kenyans, we chose, let it strengthen us. And as Kenyans, we are much stronger today than we were pre-COVID.
All right. We are much stronger, and there's more resilience, and that, I guess, is the spirit of what we've been seeing since the pandemic broke out. People have been doing unconventional things, but still being able to stimulate growth in the economy. Ambassador Yatani, I would like to come back to you. In terms of policies going forward, many Kenyans, if not all Kenyans, are expecting that growth will be facilitated through the different interventions, like the ones we have seen during the pandemic. They have been reliefs, both fiscal and monetary interventions, and a lot of people are now saying, is this going to go forward? And if not, what are some of the policies that will need to be reviewed to be able to stimulate the next fiscal year, for instance?
Yeah, thank you very much once again. And it's really important to realize that every problem provides opportunity as well as new coping mechanism. As a country, as an economy, we are still determined to rationalize government expenditure, but promote to a great extent private investment. And to this we are now trying to support, by all means, particularly the micro, small, and medium enterprises, by coming up with a credit guarantee scheme, where the national government has already provided a seed capital of 10 billion, and as a result of engagement with the banks and other institutions, we already prepared the framework and will be rolling the next few weeks. This now will provide access to the SMEs, where they'll be engaging in the various fields, create jobs, create markets, create opportunities. Additionally, we'll also continue to invest on the Agenda 4 projects, because they are the life, the blood of this country. When you look at housing, when you look at jobs through manufacturing, when you look at the universal health coverage, when you look at food security, these are basic human requirements. We are going to invest heavily to ensure that they continue providing jobs and opportunities for the rest of Kenya. We are also looking at policy reforms in the tax areas by seeing that, so that our policies and taxes will be more facilitative for a good business environment rather than punitive, or rather than just as a basis of collecting revenue. And to this extent, we are now reviewing part of taxes, like the turnover tax. You remember at the onset of this challenge, we are reduced from 3% to 1%. And we want to continue sustaining that, because that's where most Kenyans are, and we want to be more facilitated. We also want to streamline tax administration by making sure that people who are supposed to pay, they pay without options, and ensuring that there are no leakages. But to a great extent, we also want to grow the base. Rather than just tax a few people, we want to grow the base by ensuring that most Kenyans who are within the tax bracket pay, because we cannot survive without those taxes. We cannot survive without revenue. We want better and enhanced service delivery. We want to achieve more development. Because I think I also need to mention this. At the time when we were hit by this challenge, we were actually at a turning point where we said we were going to work on a fiscal consolidation process by making sure that, we reduce our appetite for loans, particularly commercial loans, completely getting rid of commercial loans. And you have to borrow. We borrow sustainably. We borrow from the concessional window. But, the magic about it is that you can only substitute with your own revenue. Casting the net wider and have, without necessarily compromising on growth. These are what we are looking at. And I want to say with satisfaction that today, the last 1 year, we have not borrowed commercially. Kenya has never defaulted on any loan. And by any index, we are among the most favorable, because if you look at, sometimes for you to achieve faster development, for you to achieve more development within a very short time, and also as a stimulator, like the infrastructure projects, they enhance trade, investment, and opportunities by creating more jobs. But how do we now achieve all this within a very short time? And the kind of resources available to us are not adequate. And all countries, all developed countries, have a basis of borrowing. Look at Japan. To the extent of 238% of the GDP, that's what their loan status is. And we are at 57. And many countries, and the US is about 110. So the countries that we depend on for support, they are also developed as a result of borrowing. So we are looking at many other measures by also rationalizing government expenses. There are certain expenses that does not add a lot of value.
Right.
We look at foreign travels. The past we've been traveling, uncoordinated and in whatever numbers. All this is now outflows of our foreign reserves to go and do investment and create jobs elsewhere. Instead, now we are through the stimulus package, we have looked at those critical sectors of growth on tourism by supporting them to, to be up and about, enabling support in the areas of renovation by supporting the conservancies, looking at employment within our own support, the teaching sector, and all these. So those are the policies that we are looking at. As much as I said, but we want to concentrate more on mobilizing resources locally by strengthening and enshrining, the public-private partnership as a core of our business and resource mobilization for realization of faster growth.
All right. You talked about resource mobilization locally, and a good number of experts, again, are worried about Kenya's public debt. We're looking at an economy that has seen an increased number of unemployed citizens. And so when you look at these two situations, at the end of the day, what Kenyans want is money in their pockets, or where it's going to come from, at least. And because the government's role is to provide an enabling environment for the private sector to be able to create jobs, how do you think this is going to work out going forward?
I think you've correctly indicated that, the role of government is to be a catalyst in the economic activity, the various economic activities, through relevant, timely, and appropriate policies, by also creating certain incentives on a number of areas. And I think we also cover quite details on the tax regime. We are now looking at, whether our taxes addresses all these concerns. To a great extent, yes. But the areas also that requires reform. And those are areas that we are looking at. We want to closely work with the private sector, and we have already done it. In the preparation of the stimulus package, also the first incentive, as well as also the recovery process, the private sector is on board, and we know together we now look at those indices that if investment is done properly, is going to enhance the outcome of the desired process. But we are not also on our own. We operate within a region of the Southern community. We also have to be alive to the policies and directions of the community.
Right.
Because you have that reciprocity in terms of what we need to do here, that has a direct bearing on the region. We do not want to really outcompete ourselves out of the market. We have to remain competitive. But the journey ahead is quite, in my view, from where I sit, I'm very optimistic. Because we've managed to withstand the shock. At the same time, our policies are working. If you want the spread of now the Kazi Mutani and all those investments that's taking place, we now realize faster development while also maintaining the market alive and ensuring that coordination and the stimulus at all levels are realized. The policies that we are going to put in place now will enable us to realize faster development, create more jobs for our people by creating that required business environment for private sector to thrive.
All right. CS Minor, I would like to come to you. In terms of the different job creation policies in this case, I would say that Ambassador Yatani has talked about, we are also looking at the opportunities that are meant to come out of this economy that the entire Eastern Africa region looks up to. Talk to us about the opportunities going forward for that small Kenyan business person that would like to thrive in the economy, for the medium-sized businesses, for also the large-scale businesses. They're all looking for opportunities, both locally and outside of the country. Where are these opportunities, and where do you think some of the challenges could be for the business people in the country?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think the opportunities are in every sector. I think there's lots that has opened up for us locally, and the fact that we know we can produce these things that we currently import means that there is a great opportunity in the domestic market in meeting, because the imported things are still very expensive. I mean, and just getting them here. The fact that if we can produce them here, we'll be able to meet that demand. Now, there are very many different sectors that within the economy. So clearly, that's, I think that's the answer. But the second answer is that there's also a great opportunity in the external market. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area, for instance, we've done an analysis, and it shows that even with just basic foods, processed foods, there's a lot of opportunity because that is currently imported into the continent. So for our agro-processors, these beans that you pack and only send to Europe, you can actually pack and send to Cote d'Ivoire, you can pack and send to Congo. The fish that we have here, with the chicken, for instance, people will tell you in Congo, they can't get good chicken. And here you are, we say we don't have a market for it. So there's a great opportunity for agro-processed products within the continent. There's also a great opportunity outside. The trade negotiations that we undertake, whether within East African community or with our partners in Europe or with the US, are always informed by an objective of expanding our markets. And what that does is that it also expands opportunities for investment. There are people who come to Kenya to invest here because of the promised market in Europe or in America. Therefore, for us as Kenyans, if people see that opportunity and bring their capital from China here, it's also important for us. We put it in real estate, but we should also put it in manufacturing. So my answer to you is that the opportunities for Kenyan business are both here and in the markets that the government has negotiated with. And it's an opportunities that helps us to attract partners that can work with us here. I had the bell, so I guess I better stop there.
Yeah, all right. Governor Anyang' Nyong'o, I'd like to come back to you. You talked about the different initiatives in Kisumu County, but one of the challenges that Kenyans, business owners experience today in the counties is the fact that they're not streamlined business regulatory frameworks to allow them to operate freely. And so this in itself is a challenge. How do we, going forward, make sure that these are streamlined to allow for better business conducted at the devolution level?
I think that is a work in progress, really. And I think together with the Ministry of Industry and other government departments, the Council of Governors is working very closely to make sure that rules, regulations, and procedures are streamlined. I'll give an example, the area of taxation. I think there's been a lot in the press about businessmen experiencing taxation across borders in counties. You have to have a license for this and the other. But I think this is a national problem, really. If you take, for example, the cost of production of any item in any industry, very much affected by energy. If you look at the bill you pay to Kenya Power and Lighting Company, those of us who use these tokens, you find that 30% of what you pay is taxes. And this is prohibitive. Now, the counties too would like to raise certain domestic revenue to finance their development. Many counties have established youth enterprise funds, women enterprise funds, and so on, so that to support local entrepreneurship. Now, I think it would be good if we had a meeting like this with the national government to rationalize some of these taxes and ways in which we can stimulate domestic production and entrepreneurship. And so I think that that concern is genuine. It's a concern the Council of Governors has also taken very seriously. Recently, when we undertook this study of economic recovery in counties, I was amazed at the various projects and initiatives counties are taking to stimulate domestic industry. Data is not there that we knew, but this study has revealed us a lot of information and data. That means really that both at the county level and national government, we should invest heavily in research and in universities to give us information on what we are doing and what we ought to do. I think in the area of health, for example, you found that when the Ministry of Health wanted to know whether we could produce a local vaccine, they approached the right institution, Kenya Medical Research Institute.
Right.
And that approach itself showed you that the Ministry of Health did not know or was not quite aware what the Kemri was doing in terms of doing research in such vaccines. And you remember a debate ensued whether the ministry had invested enough in Kemri and so on. But it's a reality in our country. Mm-hmm. I think the reliance on data for policy making is important. And COVID showed us that good data leads to good policy. And therefore, at the county and national level, we are really not going to do much if we don't have good regulations to stimulate research, get good data to make public policy. Lastly, let me say the following. I think we're a country of great potential, really. And this COVID-19 experience has shown that this potential is not fully exploited. I think in our countries, we have a great potential of having poles of industrialization. Remember, Thailand had this program, one product, one village. I think we can begin by having a policy, one industry, one county.
Yes.
To capitalize on the potential of counties. I'll give you a last example. For example, Baringo can produce a lot of honey. West Pokot too. Now, how are we capitalizing on that production of honey in these two counties? Secondly, in lots of counties in Central Province, avocado is now a going concern. Everybody is trying to produce avocado. And there's a lot of demand for avocado in the global market. Mm-hmm. Now, to what extent can avocado be produced in other counties? And what type of avocado? Have we done the soil chemistry in our counties to see what kind of agriculture can best give the highest results in agricultural production in these counties? Now, that means that our previous investment in research institution in the area of agriculture, to what extent have we kept on putting money in that research to tell us what our potential is and where we can invest in agriculture for the highest productivity? Right. I think this is what we learned from this COVID experience, that we have left a lot of our potential lying below the radar and not exploiting them properly. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. I would like to come to Jess Winter before I can give the last word to our Archbishop. What more support do you think the government can give to businesses across the country to allow them to thrive?
Thank you. I think the government, like the minister said, were very quick in the way they reacted and very quick in the way they implemented policy. They brought the VAT down, they brought the income tax down. And one thing I must commend His Excellency, the President, is that the cash deposit ratio with all banks was 5.25%, and he moved it down to 4.25%, releasing 37 billion shillings for Wanjiku. Right. Unfortunately, that money didn't make it to Wanjiku. That's another subject. But the truth of the matter is, government did a lot. Did private sector reciprocate? Yes, they did. Could we have done better? Yes, we could. What did we do wrong? Few things that I think funding is a single biggest challenge to most industry and most micro enterprises in Kenya today. And that funding, we must unlock funding. Right. If you saw the rest of the world, you saw Europe, US, they were throwing money at the problem. We were taking money off the table. Okay. Big paradigm shift needs to happen. And if we can fund Kenyan industry and Kenyan entrepreneurs, Kenya is going to fly high. I can guarantee you that.
A paradigm shift. Our Archbishop Anthony Muheria would like to give you the last word. Kenyans are, to an extent, depressed, understandably, because there's been loss of lives, there's been, teen pregnancies, gender-based violence, and all these things happening in our societies. But then the future is bright, we hope, and would like for you to speak to all Kenyans out there who are watching you and listening to you right now. What is your message to them?
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I think COVID has revealed the issue, as I said, of vulnerability and the need for us as humans to wrestle and to know how to accommodate and manage vulnerability, be it economic, be it be health, and be it be spiritual. And also here too, be it be also in the area of mental health. We have seen that it has revealed the underbelly of family health. In other words, that our families are having bad health. We've had so many incidents of domestic violence. But I think this is going to challenge us going forward, that we must have a kind of a programmatic attention to the human person, not only about the well-being in terms of economic, but above all, the spiritual, psyche, and the environment that will manage them to reach that peaceful, harmonious living and also achieve their goals. We are in the mission of hope. And I think this is what would like, if you allow me to conclude all what we have discussed, is that COVID has taught us if we keep a firm grasp of hope throughout, irrespective of the challenge and the threat, that hope would drive us humanly to do much greater than even what we had thought before. The second, that hope is not a line that is not connected. That hope is a connection to God. When we started the COVID struggle or the fight, our president, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, invited us to pray to a national prayer day. That was a first sign across the globe of a country that thought that was very, very important. I think we as a country must not lose that perspective. And the hope is connected to God. And finally, that even the challenges, including the challenges, need skills. It is not enough to have goodwill. It is not enough to want or to hope things will change. We need to up the skills of mental health attention, the skills of business too, because I think we have to sharpen our business. But we also need the skill to learn how to meet crisis with strategy and challenge, as we have learned. So to all who are listening, and especially to our leadership here, I think they have given us a good lesson. The lesson to trust God, but also a lesson to keep our eyes on the ball. And that ball is a hope of the Kenyan people. And I think our hope is really up there, that we are emerging even more powerful than we entered this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all my panelists, Ambassador Uhuru Kenyatta, the CS National Treasury and Planning, CS Betty Maina, who is Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Development, Governor Anyang' Nyong'o of Kisumu County, Archbishop Anthony Muheria, the Chairperson, Interfaith Council on COVID-19, and Jaswinder Bedi, who is a proprietor, Bedi Investments. Thank you all so much. And I would now like to invite Peter Wanjohi to come over. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
The National Hygiene Program, also known as KICC, is a national initiative designed to cushion the most vulnerable citizens living in informal settlements from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. KICC kicked off in April 2020 on select informal settlements in Nairobi and 7 other counties. The program employed over 26,000 workers in the informal settlement.
As a government, we have started to harness the energy of our young people, engaging them in the National Hygiene Program that is more commonly now being referred to as KICC Initiative.
We started a project to not only rehabilitate, but to ensure that they earn a living. So whatever the youths here are earning are the street family earning in Grogan Road. That is one of the success stories we have engaged on. And that is almost killing 3 birds with 1 stone. One, we have given them employment to rent their own shelter. Most of them are now not living in streets. Thirdly, we are trying to change their mindset by having 1-hour lessons conducted by National Youth Service on how to rehabilitate them to return to normal life.
Unachapa kazi, by the time unaenda home, umechoka, unashao na relax.
Maneno ya usalama imeimarika.
Naambia hadi president wetu asante sana.
Mshahara achelewi, tunapewa. Hii kazi ina maneno na tauni ndio ile inaelekea kung'ara.
think it's important we applaud all the panelists and all the moderators for a job well done. And with your permission, Your Excellency, I will now invite Cabinet Secretary Dr. Fred Matiang'i to guide the program. I will most humbly request that we strictly follow the timelines that we agreed. Kindly, Waziri Karibu.
President of the Republic of Kenya and Commander-in-Chief of the Kenya Defense Forces, distinguished participants, this is the last of our sessions today. I pray probably the shortest, because we are looking forward to your address to the nation, Your Excellency. And with the utmost humility and tremendous respect, may I request the following honorable gentlemen to come up front. The Honorable Senator Kenneth Lusaka, the Speaker of the Senate, the Honorable Justin Muturi, the Speaker of the National Assembly, the Honorable, the Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya and President of the Supreme Court, Mr. Justice David Maraga, the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, Honorable Wycliffe Oparanya, the Chair of the Council of Governors, and finally, the Right Honorable Prime Minister Raila Odinga. During this session, Your Excellency, we will give the leaders of the other arms of government who are here and the critical role players in this process an opportunity to each make very short, reflective remarks or responses to what has happened today and what the experiences have been in the war against COVID, because as leaders, we believe they too have a perspective on what has been going on and how we will move to the next level. I would like, therefore, to request, I have been asked by the moderators just to spend about 10 minutes, which means about 2 minutes or so each one of them. I would like to request the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi to start us off.
Thank you, Honorable Matiang'i. Your Excellency, the President, pongezi for gathering us here today so that we can reflect on the state of the nation and also be able to think together on the way forward. Kwa hivyo nasema asante sana. Your Excellency, very important messages have come from the panelists, and I'll just try and summarize one or two things that perhaps may need further reflection in terms of policy development. One is the functions as defined of the national government and the county government. I think the COVID scenario, as bad as it has been to the Kenyan people, has shown that perhaps the fear that we sometimes have that certain functions should not be devolved can be overcome through concerted effort. This is a very good example that we can move forward with. The other thing that I think we must look at is to continuously define the fault lines. In all this conversation, perhaps we needed a very specific approach to what are the fault lines, because it is clear that COVID is not over. So let me be a little bit self-provocative here. Who are the fault lines? Is it the politicians? Are we the fault line in the fight against COVID? Is it some of our institutions? Be it the parliament, be it the county assemblies? Are these the fault lines? Who has been at the forefront in breaching the rules in the fight against COVID?
Is it us? Me being one of them? And if so, then what can we do so that we as the fault lines can be curbed so that Kenyan lives can be saved? Finally, I would just like to urge the Treasury to continuously review the tax regime so that it can be more friendly to the business community, because we have seen so many institutions go under. The pressure is immense. Some are investors in this room, some are businessmen. Your Excellency, I can tell you, KRA is breathing down the necks of many people. One enters through this door, when you think you are done, the next officer enters through the other door. I think a continuous reflection around the tax regime to make it more business friendly for rapid revival will be very important. And finally, just to urge the Treasury Secretary to look at the debt numbers carefully. He gave us a fairly confident situation, but I think we all know we need to be very, very careful so that we can resuscitate our economy as soon as possible. Apart from that, Your Excellency, it has not been easy for you. Some of us have had very minimal contact with you. We had to keep away. Your life is a matter of national security. So it is understood that for us to hover around you and give you COVID could have been very dangerous for this country. So we thank God that you are here. Asanteni sana.
Thank you very much. I think as a person, I had a chance to make a few comments, and now I have a short statement that I want to give on behalf of the Council of Governors as Chair. Your Excellency, on behalf of the county governments, I take this opportunity to express our gratitude for inviting us to participate in this conference. We appreciate your continued leadership over the last 6 months. The protocols and guidelines developed since the first case was confirmed in the country have been useful in enabling the counties to confront the virus and reduce the infection rate. Kenyans' efforts, as you are aware, has been recognized globally, and we congratulate you for your leadership. Today's conference is integral in the Kenya's COVID-19 journey. As we have heard from most speakers who are here during the panel discussions, has enabled the participants to reflect on the measures that both levels of government put in place to combat the pandemic. The speakers also reflected on the efficacy of the intervention, their effectiveness, and make proposals for socio-economic structures and systems need to anchor resilience and sustainability for future infections. Over the last 6 months, county governments in tackling the prevention, control, and management of the pandemic have learned a number of lessons from what worked and what did not work, and the challenges that still confront us. One key lesson, as I had said before, is that it is time, in times of crisis, we have no choice but to stick together. The pandemic brought the two levels of government closer, and this should be the way to relate always. We cannot wish away disagreements, but this does not mean we cannot sit together and agree to disagree, but still talk and find ways to serve the Kenyan people. The various national and county government coordinating committees were a good platform of engagement. We need to see more of this. As at the onset, during the disease, the county government had various gaps in key areas. For example, they had as little or no local capacity to produce PPEs. But today, there are counties who are undertaking local production of PPEs with the policy of Buy Kenya, Build Kenya. In March 2020, county governments had 56,328 health workers. Now they have 66,935, an increase of about 10,000. In March, county government in total had 162 ICU beds. Now they have 492. In March, our capacity to respond to emergencies had not been tested, but we now know that we can build in a record 19 days a facility to host 35 beds, fully equipped, as it happened in Murang'a. Your Excellency, the Council of Governors is documenting the county government story and journey about COVID-19, a publication that will be a must-read for purposes of handling any future crisis. And thank you very much, Your Excellency, for giving us your forward for that document. The COVID pandemic crisis was in many ways a shock, which after a period of astonishment has caused an awakening to the inadequacies in the Kenyan society, but also to the opportunities available that we have not been paying attention to. Your Excellency, in conclusion, let me pose some questions that I believe we should continue to reflect on even after listening to the various speakers, especially after post-COVID period. The first question, what is the new post-COVID normality we are moving towards? The second question, what are the pitfalls that we should be aware of? I thank you very much. That's a statement from the Council of Governors.
The Honorable Speaker of the Senate. Thank you very much. Your Excellency, the President and Commander-in-Chief of our Defense Forces, all protocols observed. On behalf of Senate, I also want to report that immediately we were confronted with this problem. We did form an ad hoc committee of 7 members who successfully worked on a bill, what we call the Pandemic Response and Management Bill, to give it such pandemics a legal framework in future, because I'm sure this is not going to be the last one. It was passed on 30th of June 2020 and forwarded to my brother, Speaker Muturi, in the National Assembly. I'm sure once they conclude and you are sent to it, that will give us a legal framework on how we should handle future challenges like the one we faced. And the committee also did make some recommendations, and some of them are, they asked for the operationalization of the Micro and Small Enterprise Fund, which can assist those affected at such times. Then also government-backed credit guarantee schemes
so that banks can be able to avail liquidity, especially to small-scale business people who are seriously affected. And of course, as Senate, we also did raise the red flag to the county governments whom we oversight that, it's during such times that a lot of rules are broken, especially in procurement. And that we really urge the county governments to ensure that they follow the law, because oversight will still continue even with or without COVID-19. So we'll continue, on behalf of Senate, we'll continue giving the necessary support to the executive and other arms of government whenever we are faced with such challenges. And I also want to laud on behalf of the Senate, Your Excellency the President, the ministers, and all who are involved in this, who are involved in sorting out the challenges that we are facing, and reassure you that we'll continue giving the necessary support. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Just to appreciate the statements that have come from the various speakers who have spoken to us this afternoon, and to state that at the National Assembly level, and indeed as Parliament, we remain very focused about what policies we need to put in place. Of course, the various measures that CS Yatani has talked about, and the Honorable Mutai Kagwe, they will not have had the force of law if we did not remain engaged. And we therefore would want to assure that going forward, all that may come from the executive with regard to policies necessary to address the post-COVID-19 period will find us ready to engage with because it is not rocket science to really appreciate that, yes, as has been said by Archbishop Maria, hope is extremely important at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Waziri, Your Excellency, President, and fellow leaders here. Devastating as it has been, COVID has made us learn some lessons, quite a number of them. You will recall that when we had a few cases in the country, the judiciary was one of the institutions which immediately scaled down its operations. This is simply because of the crowds that cases attracted court, and where we could not keep distancing. With that, we have come up with quite a number of innovations to be able to continue rendering services to wananchi. And what has come handy is the use of technology. The use of technology, as some other speakers have said, some of the applications we had not even thought of came handy. But I want to point out that there are still a few challenges we need to address as a nation. We are scheduled to have a conference of the National Council on Administration of Justice and review quite a number of things that we need to put in place so that we continue serving, because we don't know how long this pandemic is going to last. One of the challenges that we have faced is internet connectivity, quite a number of our courts in the country. Other than in the major towns, connectivity is quite a challenge. And yet, we have got to reach those people. So we want to meet. When we meet, we will make recommendations to Ministry of ICT on if there's something that can be done so that we are able to continue serving wananchi. I want to say that with this onset, of course it was in our plans, but it accelerated the process. We started e-filing because it was dangerous to have documents being filed physically and delivered to our courts. With that, we started e-filing. It had challenges initially with connectivity, but it has worked very well, and we are very, very happy with the progress that has been made. I want to report that in the Nairobi and the environs, we are now able to file cases electronically, and the judges and judicial officers are able to handle cases and proceed. And in shortly, we will be moving to other parts of the country. So I want to say that the lessons that we have learned, let us utilize that. Let us up our act. For instance, I learned that even the prisoners are very, very happy to have their cases heard while they are seated in prison. So we just need some very, very minor investment in that area to make it possible for the prisoners to connect to courts so that they don't have to be transported to court. And that will be a huge saving. So for me, what I want to say is that we have done fairly well in the circumstances, but I think we can still do better. If we can put our act together, all of us, we are going to be able to overcome this problem. And even after that, let us not lose the lessons we have learned. We have very few, for example, document examiners in the country who are required all over the country, With this, the lessons we have learned from the COVID pandemic, we are not going to require those people to travel to courts. We are going to connect with them and have them testify from their offices. The same as the pathologists, the same as the ballistic experts and others. And I think those lessons learned, if we can utilize them, we will go a long way. I want to thank the Kenyans for the cooperation we have had, and let us continue and we will succeed and get this over. Thank you very much.
I just want to begin first by saying that when this pandemic first broke out in China, then started traveling to Europe and the Americas, it was generally believed internationally that by the time it lands in Africa, there will be a disaster. And that it will eventually end up like an African epidemic, like malaria, bilharzia, HIV/AIDS, and so on. But that has not come to pass. And I think as Africans we must congratulate ourselves for having taken measures that has ensured that Africa did not become the major victim of this pandemic. Here back home, we need to congratulate ourselves as Kenyans. I want to congratulate Kenyan people for their patience, their resilience, and caring toward each other. This has helped us to reach this far. Also, we need to convey our condolences to families who have lost their loved ones. And we say that may the Lord rest their soul in eternal peace. We also want to congratulate our medical personnel who have been very diligent in their service to our people. In a very risky line of duty, they have exhibited a sense of patriotism that is unique. Therefore, we need to congratulate them. Some of them have lost their lives the process of trying to save lives of other Kenyans. We also want to congratulate the Ministry of Health under the leadership of my friend Honorable Mutai Kagwe, who has continued to guide this country, giving vital information to our people, what needs to be done during this period of time. They may not have been perfect, but nowhere in the world have they been in any country been perfect dealing with this. So we thank them and congratulate them. Then our religious leaders, who heeded the call by the government and shut the institutions of worship, whether they are churches, mosques, or temples. We know the kind of stress that this imposed on them. But then they also saw that they had a duty to protect the lives of our people. We want to congratulate them. But this pandemic has also produced young heroes in our country. The innovators, young innovators. We have people who are able to produce ventilators, beds, masks, PPEs, and so on in this period of time. It really shows a sense of innovation that our people have, and that given an opportunity, our people can excel just along the other youth in the world. Then we want to also thank our small-scale farmers. Let's remember them. Those who produce cassava, potatoes, fruits, maize, millet, chicken, and so on, who have continued to serve our cities and towns during this period of epidemic. From Busia to Kitui, to Mandera, to all over the place, they've done commendable work. Then we have also our truck and van drivers, and border riders, who have provided a critical link between the production and consumption supply chain. Some of them have been doing this thing at great risk to their personal safety. But there's something that we have learned from this, Mr. President. There's over-reliance on imports in our country. It's risky and dangerous. When the world shuts down, like the world is shut down, you find yourself in a situation where you're completely helpless. That's the reason why we're saying that made in Kenya and made for Kenya should not just be a slogan, but it must be something that we want to realize. That we must begin to manufacture certain essential things like pharmaceutical products, food products, things like textiles and so on. We need to produce in our country. And that we should move away from over-reliance on imports of essential things. We must have a national list of essential goods and products that must be produced locally. Finally, President, the youth of Kenya, during this period of time, have exhibited exceptional sense of unity and patriotism. Here I want to thank the government for coming up with this Kazi Mashinani, which has provided essential jobs for our youth, which are productive. The President, we need all the time to continue to have this conversation on how to expand our national cake. That our national cake must expand so that we can be able to feed most of our people. The reality is that our population continues to grow exponentially, but we are not producing enough to be able to feed our people. There's too much concern about consumption, taking away from the national cake than expanding the national cake. This itself is actually a recipe for disaster. We must see that this national cake is expanded rather than just taking off from it and going to give it away from other people as alms, throwing it other people's alms. This is a conversation that we're going to have on another day. But I want to conclude first by thanking the government, the President, for leading from the front during this very difficult period. It has been very difficult to meet physically, like Honorable Ndabadi said, because we don't want the source of infection. It has been difficult. But I'm sure we will manage there, and I hope that we're going to continue to manage going forward. I thank you.
Your Excellency, distinguished participants, I request the gentleman up front to remain seated there for the next few minutes. On behalf of my colleagues, both in the National Emergency Response Committee, my colleagues in Cabinet, and the entirety of the executive branch of government that has worked together with our colleagues in the Council of Governors together. Your Excellency, we are very grateful for the opportunity, and we thank you so much for putting this meeting together. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to that point that we have all been waiting for, and it's now my distinct pleasure and privilege to request you please to be upstanding as I invite His Excellency